Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's discussion on the new normal in brand storytelling. I'm Rick Parkhill. I'm the director of brand storytelling, and I'm delighted to have Kim Miller, the CMO of ToysRUS, here today to help guide us through this conversation with Bob Cagliero from Bodega Studios, Andrew Strickman, a brand storytelling advisor, and brand storyteller deluxe, an honor roll inductee. We have Tom Wall from Walgreen's Boots Alliance, a great group here. And we're going to talk about, will brand storytelling take center stage here in the future? I'm going to share my screen here real quick because we are going to put brand storytelling on the center stage in Park City this January 2022. So let me just share this with you real quick.
There it is.
Everybody's seeing this. Here's where you can all be on January 19th. That's only less than 6 months away. We'll all be convening in Park City during the Sundance event. And here's how we're going to put brand storytelling on center stage. We're asking people to submit their films to the Brand Storytelling Theater. So we're accepting submissions. They just opened yesterday. Submission windows open till October 1st. We have a selection committee that includes all of these folks. It's being chaired by Mark Battaglia. Invite you to go take a look at this. We've got a great group of brands and agencies and directors that all make up this selection committee. In the past, people have come to me for the event and said, I've got a film I'd like to screen, Rick, here's what it is. And I look at it and we kind of make an internal decision. We're going to change that up and let these people decide. We're opening it up to submissions. We expect to get couple hundred submissions and our goal is to showcase the best in brand storytelling this January, not only in person, but we will screen these virtually as well. We'll do them festival-esque style, where the brand director and anyone that they want to bring in for the panel will introduce the film and take Q&A afterwards. So the best way to motivate the C-level folks that make decisions on budgets is to show them examples of what can be done in brand storytelling. And we're going to put it front and center here. So I'm going to go ahead and quit the stop share. I'm going to hand this over to Kim. And Kim, take it away. What's going to happen here in the future? Are we going to stop interrupting people and put more emphasis on telling stories?
Well, I think that we started doing that during the pandemic and the response has been wonderful. What I love about this group is we had previously done a conversation that was so ripe with different feedback that we decided to take the second part of it. The first part, we dealt with more brand empathy and how we were bringing empathy into the brand marketing and the connection with people, which felt very relevant because of the fact that there was a lot of empathy in a lot of different ways that needed to be had by what was going on in our world. And also in general, having the ability for the consumer to feel that the brands understood them as individuals and people, and that our main goal wasn't just to shove product in their face and get their money back. And so we had a wonderful conversation about that led to this second part. And last time we called it the new normal, but the truth of the matter is what the series was supposed to be is the next normal, because I think everybody would agree that there's always a next normal. Like, it just changes constantly. And I know for me, it feels better to say, how many iterations of my career, of my job, of my way of doing things, of my interacting with consumers have changed through my lifetime. So there's always going to be a next. And that, I feel, gives a lot more inspiration than feeling like we're put in a situation now where we've got to do something totally beyond anything we've done before. We're all so capable and pivot so well in our world. So I'd love everybody to just go really quickly and introduce themselves and what your your role is in brand storytelling, and then everybody will understand where we're coming from, our points of view, and then we'll get into some deeper conversation. Bob, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Kim. And thanks, Rick, for having me today again. I'm Bob Cagliero. I'm the executive producer of business development at Bodega Studios. My primary role there is taking all my experience from the advertising agency side, the production company side, the post-production company side, and represent Bodega Studios. And mainly, I have been dealing with, even though I've been in business for a while, the last 7 years with Bodega Studios, my focus has been dealing with directly to brands and trying to increase our partnerships with brands that we already have and find new ones. So we've been fortunate because we got into the direct to brand space probably a good decade ago and earned ourselves some preferred status with certain brands. And I really enjoy telling the message, for the brands and crafting that with our team.
That's great. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of insight into what we're going to be talking about today. Let's see, who wants to go next? Tom from Walgreens.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kim, and thanks, Rick, and everybody for having us back for part two. I'm with Walgreens Boots Alliance, the global holding company that also includes Walgreens here in the US. So been a really busy time for us this year, obviously, last 18 months with COVID testing, vaccine rollout, all that ongoing work, upcoming Delta variant work, I know, just plenty of stuff going on, plenty of stories to tell. And my role within brand storytelling is that in addition to doing tactical storytelling work for Walgreens, I'm also in charge of kind of developing and sourcing content from vendors, from partners, from film companies, from agencies, from internal and external contributors, and pulling it all together to create kind of a cohesive brand voice, or as much as you can do around a large global brand, while also telling our story to US audiences on our US only channels. So a lot of plates spinning at all times, but really happy to be on here and talking to folks.
Totally. Is that you, George?
That is, unless my other personality's coming out.
If we all don't have a few by now, I think we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, but yeah, excited to see the team here again. I help IBM. We're a house of brands. I help us build brands through storytelling, experiences, and engagement. And for us, it's been a lot about reinventing the brand when it comes to a 110-year-old company that has to constantly try to figure out how to stay relevant every decade. And I'm excited to talk about what maybe that means for this next decade as we emerge out of COVID. But I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Great. And then last but not least, Andrew.
Thank you. And thanks again to Rick and everyone. I was most recently headed up brand and creative at Realtor.com for 8 years. And prior to that, had a variety of roles across big global brands, as well as on the agency side, leading a word of mouth marketing agency. Prior to that, as a journalist. And so I've always sort of been in this position of seeing myself as a storyteller, and the role definitely helped define the function of storytelling within each of those jobs. But I think what really came to light for us over the last 8 years in particular was that in order to find audiences that might be more difficult to reach through traditional advertising, funding content development with partners that had existing standing up audiences that were of interest to us was a way that we could really build our brand. And whether that was a partnership with the Golden State Warriors or an entertainment brand like Cirque du Soleil, or media brands like Tastemade, where we launched a full-length TV series last year, it really gave us an opportunity to tell the unique story of Realtor.com in the context of shared experiences and people's experiences out in the world. And that's really where I see the opportunity for brands going forward, is to find ways to reach new audiences and entertain or inform or educate them alongside elevating brands in the process.
Right, so the partnership aspect is really interesting when you go into the entertaining, informing, because I hear what you're saying. You're broadening your reach. So if you're
Yeah.
always selling X to, consumer X, that works out nicely. But when you need to tell everybody about X that maybe isn't your direct person, it's important. One of the things that I always find that when I'm with teams is there's so many times where I feel like I call it talking to ourselves, where we have a bunch of different messages, a bunch of different products, a bunch of different initiatives and campaigns. And we think it's all so wonderful to be telling the same people over and over again. And then we wonder why they're not so excited anymore. So these partnerships are an interesting way to do that. Why don't we start on that a little bit? Because, it's an interesting part of brand storytelling that may possibly continue. It helps business because even though you're not shoving a product down somebody's throat, you're introducing your brand, your values, and eventually your product to people that may not have realized all that you're about or how they connect. Who'd like to talk more about that?
I'm happy to take that lead just for a moment and just talk about, the challenge we felt coming in. I was brought in to help grow a consumer brand where there really hadn't been one before at Realtor.com. It was a 17-year-old company who had spent its entire first 17 years marketing itself to the real estate industry. And so we came into a crowded, competitive marketplace where a number of brands had really introduced themselves and engaged with consumers in more meaningful ways. And so we knew we had to do something different. Even our traditional 30-second, 15-second TV spots were focused on telling interesting stories, using humor as sort of the hook that was differentiating in the marketplace. And when you think about using humor to tell stories about probably the most serious purchase many people will ever make in their lives, you have to have nuance to it. We never wanted to be sort of a direct response advertiser, but I think that what we learned over time was that there were just so many stories that couldn't fit into 15 or 30 or even 6 seconds. And so that's what really spurred us to look for those opportunities to tell longer stories, and longer stories that were more meaningful to the audiences we were trying to reach. And I think that that's what brands are trying to do right now, is to find that connective point with its end audience or end consumer and customer, where they can have a meaningful joint experience together around something that's interesting or informative or entertaining, as I said.
And long form, what does that mean to you? And where is that outlet when you do that? I mean, I know you mentioned Tastemade and actually, I think a series around that, but what have been some of the successes and what did they look like?
Yeah, I mean, we were constantly learning as we were doing. We spent 3 years working with the actress Elizabeth Banks in partnership as our celebrity spokesperson. And the first year we launched a multi-episode web series with her that won a lot of awards, but from a consumer response perspective was a little challenging because the episodes were 4.5, 5 minutes in length. And at that unique moment in time, that length of content wasn't really being engaged with online in the way that either shorter or much longer form content was. But of course, now a few years later, 3 to 4 minutes is like, the sweet spot of that type of storytelling. And I think it's very interesting to see how these audience understandings have changed and morphed over time. I mean, now you look at a company like TikTok, which started out as very short form vertical video, and over the last few months has actually expanded to create almost unlimited length video opportunities for its creators. And I think that people are more willing, particularly after the pandemic, to sit down and consume something that takes a little bit longer.
Do you think that's one of the reasons why they are, just because they're just the whole cadence of their life has changed? Or do you think there's something else that's made them more willing to have something, maybe 2 bites of the snack instead of a nibble?
I'm happy to answer that unless somebody else wants to jump in. Yeah, I'll go. I do think that the pandemic slowed our lives down. It gave us more time to be considerate about the things that we did find interesting and were willing to engage with. But I think that some of that will continue. But at the same time, I think that, we don't know what we don't know yet. And similar to sort of the rise of TikTok over the last 12, 14, 16 months has shown that even when we think we have a view of everything that's good out there, something's going to come along and sort of, throw us back on our heels a little bit. And so I think that being very cognizant of looking forward and keeping an eye on what is happening across the content ecosystem is very, very important to success in the future.
I'll add on to that a little bit and say that from what we've kind of seen and experienced, I actually think it's a more competitive environment than ever for attention, because now people are at home. So now you have access to 3 or 4 different screens that you wouldn't have access to when you're in the office. Kids are doing more and more screen time than ever, just out of necessity. Like all my friends that are parents, man, I feel for them. But I feel like it's more competitive environment than ever. So we are actually seeing our video view rates, they would pretty solidly drop off after a minute. And now it's like kind of creeping up to that 30-second, 45-second territory. So, when we talk about and throw around the word, like you said before, Kim, when you and Andrew were talking about long form content, it's kind of a push and pull with our team, because we're data informed. We try to let the data tell the story to us about what our audience wants to see and in what format. But we're all trained journalists, and we're all writers, and we're all content creators. So we have to separate our heart from the data a lot of the time. And so, when I hear like long form pop up, a lot of us write these, 2,500, 3,000 word pieces that we're so proud of and really want to get out there. But then we start using our heat mapping tools and seeing that everybody is scrolling, doing one scroll, maybe, certainly not 2 or 3 scrolls. And so tree falls in the forest, it's like words 1,500 through 3,000 can be the most beautiful thing you've ever written, but nobody's getting to it. And I just feel like, unfortunately, I know it's kind of like doom and gloom a little bit, but I feel like attention spans are shorter than ever. I feel like one of the reasons TikTok really has taken off right now is because now people have 15 seconds in between, one meeting and one call and one activity and another activity. And now, instead of sitting down, turning on your TV and watching a 20-minute program, an hour-long program, you really just have time for little tiny Instagram reels or little tiny TikToks. And that's kind of the common language that we now talk to each other with, is like, my wife and I send each other TikToks and reels over text. And that's like, you can actually see a back and forth conversation that's literally just her sending a reel and then me replying with a reel. And like, it's fun and it's funny, but I'm also like, I take a step back as a content creator to be like, I remember when the big struggle was, I've created this beautiful film and I wish you would watch it on, on at least a 50-inch TV. So please don't watch it on a tablet. And now it's like, okay, well, if I can just get you to watch whatever this is, even if it's on a vertical phone screen for 15 seconds, at least you're watching it. So I feel like there's kind of a balancing act that we're all doing, because we all want to and need to and are capable of creating really, really high quality content. But how much time are we getting with people now? And I feel like it's just getting less and less and less. So how do we maximize that? And how do we, try to take advantage wherever we can?
Well, and then you got the attention span of the consumer or the viewer or whatever. You want to tell, as a creator, a cohesive story of value. And then if you're throwing in a brand or a product mixed into that in the shortest amount of time, it takes a very special creative to really do that well. Anybody have any insight into some ways it's worked and into some ways it's just been too much of a challenge?
I'll kind of take that one for a second. Oh, sorry, George, if you want to go.
No, go for it. I'll go after you.
I think the really key to what you said there is differentiating branded content from brand sponsored film, for instance. So we've had a lot of success recently doing that with creating a 7-part docu-series called In Our Words, which is stories from people who are either themselves or in a community that is vaccine hesitant, and then just kind of letting them tell their own story about why that is and how they're overcoming that. They don't have to be in a Walgreens store. They don't have to be holding up a Walgreens bag. They don't, there's a really quick thing at the end that says presented by Walgreens, but it's almost to where if you really want content, and certainly these are, 4-minute pieces, right? So if you want people to pay attention to or devote their time to a piece of content like that, it almost turns them off if they instantly understand that it's branded content, unless you're a very special brand like Red Bull or something like that. So if they'll say, this is a Walgreens, piece of infotainment, then I'm not going to engage. But these were specifically created by filmmakers and branded to be films. by themselves, whether or not Walgreens was involved, whether or not it was an approved talking point from our comms team or our leadership.
Right.
And so I think that's a way we found success. They're very well received. It's all about distribution now from our standpoints. So, you look at the different channels that are working, and LinkedIn ended up being a really, really successful place for these, not just because we were sharing it, but we'd have the filmmakers sharing it on their own pages. We'd have different leaders within Walgreens shared on their own pages. And we have a big chunk of our audience is Walgreens team members and people around the country that are struggling themselves with, here they are. Some Walgreens team members are very vaccine hesitant, right? And so you're being asked professionally to go out there and peddle this life-saving measure that a lot of people are skeptical about. And so it was a very real kind of human experience to see other people thinking about things the same way they were and helping them to kind of evangelize that message to either friends, family, neighbors, or patients.
George, what is your thought?
Well, people have a broken trust with content they consume in various channels that we even just talked about. And we as a brand, we as brands are built upon trust. We're built upon relationships. And so we have to do everything possible to be open and transparent about the content we make. Number one, we shouldn't make it unless we have the right to produce it, not just because we can make it. And I think a lot of brand content suffers from not really knowing who your brand is. That's more of a brand identity problem. And so you'll see people just making content and making stuff. When I started at IBM, we had a similar challenge. It was really clear on who we were during the Smarter Planet days. But after that, the company, the technology world moved on to the cloud wars. And what does that mean? Well, you don't want to just become a product. You don't want to just become all about cloud. You want to be, or AI, because then you're just talking about things. And then as those things evolve, who are you? And so I think this is an opportunity for a lot of brands to really understand your identity before you understand content and stories you tell. And we're going through that right now, refiguring out our identity. What's our why? Why do we exist? What's the thing that consumers and people can't live without? So I think there's that whole content, evolved in different areas, sometimes through SEO and under digital, sometimes it evolved in social, sometimes it evolved under brand teams. And so when I used to work at an agency, I had all those different kind of clients, and you could see they all had content either worked or did do stuff well, and sometimes didn't do so well, depending upon where it was organized under. And we gotta break the role of content from the organizational structure and make it more about be audience centric. All businesses need to be audience centric and redesign their structure against that. But then the content has to play different roles throughout the journey in that case. So, but I think in the most important thing, trust and transparency. Brands, we have to have it, and then the guide on what we make that it pays off that trust has to be born in our brand identity.
Very well said. And I'm a big believer in the trust and transparency and the messaging, coming back to ToysRUS in its new form, as we move ahead with some of the initiatives we're going to be announcing, I definitely want to be sending, email blasts and information and working with the consumer so that they understand it's going to be a rollout type situation, so that they understand really what's happening. They've been very confused. It's like, I thought you didn't exist. Oh, now you're telling me. And then there were two stores, like what's going on? And then, it's like, oh, well, we do have 900 stores in 25 countries that do very well. So, as I'm working on social, I cannot wait till my social person starts. I'm seeing the comments and the confusion and the friction. And, you're in a role like ours, we sit there and go, we're not doing our job if they don't even understand who we are and what we're about, and in a clear way. We have a relationship. Then there's also the other side that I need to understand how it fits in. So there's the content for content's sake. There's what, you were talking about with the vaccination scenario and, that engagement and that trust from that perspective. But then there's, the CFO and the CEO that comes walking into somebody's office and says, okay, we've got 85 widgets here. We've got, this here, we got to get rid of these. We've got to, what is your marketing and what is your content doing? Figure this out. When that happens, is it two separate pieces of content? Is there a way to say to the consumer, this is the moment we're showing you why this widget works so well. There's other stuff that's about other things, and just do a mix. How's that balance take place? And how do you be all that without sending a mixed message that, we're delivering you value and we want to be in a relationship, we want to build trust. And, if you could buy this widget, you could be saving my job.
I kind of want to make two quick points about that. The first one has to do with SEO. I think that's a really important thing that George brought up. And it's been really important for us to differentiate the role that SEO plays in getting people to look at our content, because there's kind of two things it can do. There can be the very intentional, like we went and researched the right keywords, we're reaching exactly who we want to reach, and they ended up with our content. Or there's what's been happening to us lately, which is so many people are searching Walgreens plus COVID vaccine, Walgreens plus COVID test, and ending up on stories that maybe they weren't intending to end up on, but ended up serving them well anyway. But on the other hand, also ended up being like by and far our most consumed content pieces, completely out of our goal and completely out of our expectations. And so it's kind of trying to balance that and making, SEO work for you, and then recognizing when you're kind of getting lucky and getting a lot of, I wouldn't say unearned views, but getting a lot of views that are kind of just by happenstance, but just based on kind of the perfect storm of keywords leading them to that. But the second point I really want to make, and that has to do with what you just asked, Kim, is when it comes to creating content versus when, because we sit in comms, right? So we have a lot of corporate comms leaders that sit within our structure, and we have, kind of various asks and demands from up that hierarchy, where maybe it's a PR person that put together a communications plan and then checked off the box of storytelling and said, okay, well, we need to do some storytelling around X. And one of our first questions always has to be, okay, to the point that was made earlier, what right do we have to talk about X? And I'll just say last summer, X was the social justice movement. If we have something to say about it company-wise that we have done, a tangible thing that we have done, then yes, we have earned the right to do some storytelling behind it. But we're not just going to put out some storytelling that kind of falsely plants this flag in the ground that we haven't earned from a company standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, from a reputation standpoint, and then kind of consumers can really sniff out phoniness and falseness really, really, really quickly. So from our standpoint, we really look at it as, we need to be thought partners in this, but we also need to, if you're coming to me with a content request, I need to ask you, do you have a specific story to pitch me? Or do you want me to talk about a certain concept and then kind of reverse engineer it? And the way, when it happens that second way, it's just never good. It's never authentic. If you're like, hey, I really need to find, let's just say a customer with a disability that used our curbside pickup. Can you find that? Probably we can, but it's not going to be somebody that was really forthcoming with their story. It's not going to be something that was found and discovered and reported on organically. And so it's not going to come across the way that it's being intended to come across. Whereas if we're acting like the news bureau that we are within the comms team, and stories come up and they do happen to link to certain strategic priorities, that's where we really find that sweet spot of authentic storytelling content, that we do have that right and that claim to stake to tell. But at the same time, it never feels from the audience perspective like we're forcing it, or like we're trying to be something we're not to them, or like we're trying to put something out just for the sake of putting something out. Like, everybody's talking about X, so we need to also talk about X. Like, if it doesn't have to do with the healthcare space, the retail space, the vaccine space, then there's certain things that we don't need to be hopping into unless we have something real to say about it.
So does brand storytelling sell product?
There's content that sells that's easily measurable, and content that sells that's not easily measurable. But all content, if done right, plays a role in moving someone to increasing their likelihood to sell. The thing I did when I started IBM was I focused on content that is harder to measure at first. because that's the more branded stuff. And we had a brand relevancy problem. And about 2 years later, we shifted focus. And I think looking back at it, I would have done the opposite. I would have focused on content that sells first, because that stuff is very ordinary and not sexy, but you have the biggest chance to make it extraordinary and different for your audience. We had these really boring product demos, and we said, what if we made them the most amazing, awesome demos in the world? What does the sexiest product demo look like? And we went around and looked at it. It's like, how could you make the best 15-minute product fly-through experience, because they're so boring seeing these screenshots. Like, and by investing time and creative energy on that, the things that you would think creative people wouldn't like, they do like, because it's a challenge. And we thought, how do we turn these terrible email blasts that our performance marketing team was producing, that actually had, because it was measurable, had a negative impact on ROI. You had a better chance of buying something if you never received an email from us than if you did. That was when that data point came out. Yeah, when that data point came out, I was like, oh my God, I love telling the big, beautiful stories and films, but we can make not just the ordinary, but the bad great. And so I think content does sell. It just is what you can measure. Content sold when we were in the Mad Men era, but we couldn't measure beyond reach and Nielsen, right? So but my biggest, what I would say to us as a content community is, go find the stuff that's easily measurable and make it amazing. And that's banner ads, whatever, just make it awesome.
I did just want to tack one thing onto what George said, which is that when you do that, you create this groundswell of interest and support from within that helps you when you want to do that big, hairy thing that you had some stress about whether you're going to get funding for, a little easier, because people within the organization already know the value you can bring to both the small as well as to the large.
And what?
So, hey, Kim, just to interject here is that, because you're a member of the C-suite now, as a chief marketing officer, what are the conversations that are going on in terms of content versus advertising? Are the C-level people looking at this and going, this is a time where we need to tell more stories. We need to show our brand purpose and our empathy and our identity, and we need to do it through storytelling and stop being interruptive? Is there more focus going to?
Yeah, it's such an interesting
there?
time in this brand. So I think that, and right now we have a half a beat before we aggressively start selling product again. For me walking in, they said, what do you think needs to be done? And right away I said, I thought that we needed to set the why, the who we are, the why, and the voice that we're going to speak to our consumer with and build their trust. Everybody, it's confusing. So in that predicament, it's, I think, most importantly to tell the brand story, to entertain them. We're doing a variety of things. One of the first initiatives is the fact that ToysRUS is a trusted authority. Really, nobody's stepped in a toy space and been the destination, whether e-com or in stores, and been able to be impactful and empowering to parents and to gift buyers, for children. So that was a stance I wanted to take very strongly and seriously on, what we know and what's the best way that we can start helping parents do that. So instead of, hawking the bike, we're doing how to measure your kid to buy a bike, or, if you're buying pools for your backyard, now that a lot of us don't go to public pools, lakes or whatever, what's the right size for the right age? What does your backyard have to have? Trampolines, various things like that were much less about selling and much more about, if you were in the market to buy, we're here for you. So that was one of my first things out of the gate. At the same time, the other thing that was really important is to remind people of the nostalgia of this brand, because everyone used a Toys R Us kid, but our kids might not be Toys R Us kids. So, everybody seems to remember the song. So I'm getting a revived version of the song written in a few weeks, which is very exciting. You know, Jeffrey, the giraffe, everybody remembers him and he just totally disappeared. So we brought Jeffrey back in these green screen, very just fun little vignettes that is now going to be part of my TikTok strategy for the first leg out. And really for me, it's reminding people that this brand could be their go-to place when they're confused about where to shop, when they need a certain age range, when they need a toy for a special needs kid, or when they're focused on a learning, you know, process of children. They go, you know, play is a very important developmental process in children growing up. And, you know, sometimes it's confusing on what that means, what that is, how it helps, all that kind of stuff. And we want to empower people to be able to you know, have enough information yet in a lighthearted way, because they have enough of heavy on them, to give it to them simply so that they could, you know, be empowered consumers. So that's one thing. That being said, though, when I walked in, a lot of the content, we have a lot of partners. Mattel, Hasbro, you know, every major toy company is one of the companies that sell in our stores and will continue to do so. You know, a lot of good things coming up. I'm very excited. But you're also in a position where everybody wants to see their, you know, hot toy list for Christmas, their brand be part of that. They want to, you know, they want to see that you're, if they're going to be committing to being, you know, one of the people in your store, one of the main brands in your store, they want to know you're giving them love too. So then there's that whole product being sold. And when I came in, email was also a perfect example of very much like, you know, there's this, there's this, there's this. And it didn't really resonate well either. So it's that understanding of how to mesh both, so it doesn't feel like you're not being genuine, you know, that there's that empowering and that conversation and that listening, but at the same time that, you know, here's also things that would be cool to buy and here's why. And if you can give the value in a way that truly is giving value, for instance, if it's a, you know, a building toy, and share why building it helps kids and at what ages and, you know, and that kind of stuff, then you can feature a product, sell it, you know, feature why this one might be better than the others just because of the product nature of the product, but also be giving that value. Right now, we're not looking at big advertising. We will be in the future, but from my perspective, having an iconic brand that kind of went away, there's just that really, and the whole world changed since then. It's just about that consumer centric relationship. And the thing is, they're all fans, which is such a nice way to start. It's a gift for me.
So Kim, I got to think the fact that you are now the CMO at ToysRUS speaks volumes for what's, you know, the thinking of the C-suite at the organization, that they recruited somebody with a strong storytelling background and production and not necessarily, you know, marketing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the interesting thing that's happened, and I'm sure a bunch of you guys can relate to this too, is how it crosses over. You know, it's, you know, what my job was and a lot of what I did were two different things, because, you know, before I got here, I worked with Martha Stewart. There wasn't a week that went by that there wasn't a CBD product, a pot, a pan, pet litter, you know, clothing, you know, all of that stuff that was storytelling, but it was very much, you know, launch initiatives and social media initiatives that were wrapped very strongly into marketing. We also did events across the country, you know, the Martha Stewart Food and Wine Festival that was all about marketing and the PR around that, and, you know, the lead generation and all of that kind of stuff. And then when we had commercials, like right before I left, we did a commercial for Martha's new frozen food that just got announced the other day. And, you know, I worked with an agency on creating that, which was advertising, and it's all kind of storytelling, but it's all, you know, interspersed. I think one of the reasons I got hired for this job is I know the CEO, excuse me, and he knows I make shit happen. And I think that, you know, in a situation where, you know, we're a startup, so budgets aren't huge, but we need to have an impact immediately. And I also love this brand. I applied for this job for 2 years.
Yeah, how cool. So hey,
yeah,
we got to go to Bob here, because Bob, you work with a lot of different brands, and, you know, Bodega has a history of, I mean, you guys produce TV commercials as well, right? And have for years. What are you hearing from your clients? Are Are they more interested in telling stories today than in making 30-second spots?
Well, and it's interesting. We started off with the partnerships topic, and when I first started Bodega about 8 years ago, I realized we were right in the thick of. We have three main client bases, which is networks and streamers, and then AORs and brand direct, and the work that we were doing with NBC was a lot of co-branded work. We did it with Mazda, and they did it around an event called Drive for Good, and they did it every year at the tree lighting ceremony with NBC and Mazda and Mini Driver, and they were fostering children startup charities. So what I'm getting at is when I initially saw this type of messaging and storytelling start in a kind of a co-branded world, I then saw how the brands kind of adopted those similar things. They were initially based on events or efforts that the brand was doing for good. And I think what I've seen in brands in general and storytelling is that, to George's point, to Andrew's point, to everyone's point here, if you don't have a right to tell a story or have a true drive behind it, the messaging is just going to fall flat or be had, if you will. But what has happened, I think, is that we're fortunate in this group. You have three brands that can intrinsically drive a great message without, I think those stories that you mentioned, Kim, were great. I was thinking just in general how positive the world of toys could be, but the way you presented it really built kind of like a leadership role or an authority, as you said. And Tom, with Walgreens, the vaccine is just a natural place to support and to be a leader on. And there's so many things going on with IBM, obviously, that they're doing to drive things with Watson to solve a lot of problems or whatever. So I guess when you have something that's really, truly a good story internally, it comes across well. We've done things for HP that, you never would have thought their printing hardware would be attached to, resolving malaria in South Africa. I have a great story about they started printing nets, for beds, and people were using them more often because they were colorful in parts of their homes. So I guess what I'm getting at is I saw the evolution of brand storytelling start on kind of like a co-branded level, and then corporate social responsibilities seem to have become really important to not only the consumer, but to the brands. And then they started nurturing the good side of their brand or creating their own events or their own efforts that allowed you to tell some great, CSR stories. And I have to say that I'd say the majority of the storytelling we do for brands has some sort of CSR ingredient to it and for good ingredient to it. And I think that's just what people want to see, and they enjoy the emotion. Sure, there's going to be, this is why you should do this, and this is how you should do this, and all that. And that's equally valuable. But I do believe that when there's a message that you're helping the consumer somehow and not selling a product, but you're helping them as either an authority or as a supporter for an effort or whatever, that's usually the home run ingredient. So that's kind of my perspective from a producing and creating standpoint.
Great.
How about back to the partnership theme, Andrew, that you had mentioned earlier, that we kind of kicked off with is, are there good examples of brands that are teaming up together to create partnerships and bring two different audiences in? Tom, you must work with various partners as a retailer, and you have anything to say to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there's kind of two ways. I think our partnerships not only provide, great paths towards business success, but it really provides us with a lot of storytelling fodder. I can just share a few. Like, I think one of the best partnerships we've done so far this year is partnering with Uber to give free Uber rides to vaccination sites, to Walgreens vaccination sites, particularly underserved areas where people don't have access to their own vehicle, or live in food or healthcare deserts where it's miles between where they live and where a Walgreens store is, or any other place to get vaccinated. So that was a really successful partnership to kick off. I think two other things where storytelling and partnership have really gone hand in hand in kind of unexpected ways is we were back in the I guess this would be late fall 2020. We were stocking our shelves with the I guess he has a name now, but at the time it was Baby Yoda Squishable toy, Squishmallow.
Love him.
Yeah. Oh, it's the cutest thing, and it hit shelves right before the Mandalorian new season came out. So we got a lot of great, beautiful built-in storytelling exposure there too. Because I think the other value in partnerships is now you have two sets of owned channels that can syndicate your content, and they can amplify each other. And in addition to just providing that good kind of cross-link stuff, the Star Wars audience is not an audience that was really going to be proactively seeking out Walgreens stories, but you get a story up there like that can get parents and kids, Star Wars fans, and your typical Walgreens consumer all agreeing on one piece of content, and that was one of our really better performing things. And then stuff that's really cool that we work with Microsoft, and we also work with a company called Wing that does drone delivery. And so this is kind of a cool partnership to explore in terms of people like sort of tech heads, like people that are really interested in tech innovation type stories. And so it's a small pilot right now, no pun intended, where there's a small town in Virginia that relies 100% on drone delivery through this organization called Wing that provides our drones to deliver essentials to them. We're going to start to try to expand it across the country, but it's more fun storytelling than anything, because there's just a couple thousand people that live in the town in Virginia that actually utilize the service, but everybody can see these cool videos of drones swooping around in the Virginia hills delivering Advil to people from the local Walgreens. So it really does work hand in hand. It's a great syndication strategy, and it's also a great way to bring in and reach new consumers that just otherwise wouldn't be really going anywhere near the Walgreens own channels.
That's smart. And to jump on your Mandalorian story, one of the things that ToysRUS has always done that I'm a part of now is aligning with future entertainment and actually creating characters from the new movies that are coming out. And for ToysRUS, the toy timeframe Q4 is huge. And then, you have birthdays and then, any other times, but, there's Q4. Having those kind of initiatives related to hit movies that relate to kids or toys and creating products that are unique to your store is a great way to drive consumers in at different times.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think this a lot of great stuff. So I think the conclusion to the next normal is that brand storytelling and the way we're doing it is here to stay, and will continue to evolve. I'm very interested in looking at partnerships. I haven't had a lot of time to do beyond it, but I love your story about Uber and getting the vax. I mean, that's just such a natural. And when you find those partnerships that align, it feels so effortless. It's not, and I know what those contracts are like, but to the consumer, they feel the value and not the end goal of the business behind it.
Yeah, I mean, the best kind of partnership isn't one where people are like, "Oh, that's a really crazy partnership. I can't believe that." It's like, "Oh, it makes sense that you guys would be partnered." Is that a Squishmallow, Rick?
What are you? It's a Squishmallow.
It worked on me. Like our advertising usually doesn't work on me, but I went out and bought one for my goddaughter. Like, yeah, once I was done writing the story about it.
This is my 22-year-old Squishmallow.
Oh my God. Yep, that's added to something that you probably didn't need, but now you're the proud owner of. And somebody did their job right in getting that, making you drive you to that purchase. Well, I thought this was absolutely wonderful. It's it's an honor to talk with such amazing people about this topic, and I learn a great deal every time I join. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for participating in this. Any other topics that any of you want to bring forward in the future, we'll organize a roundtable like this. I'm all in, so just let me know. And be sure to think about films to submit. George I know you've got some films you want to show at Sundance this year. So
Yeah,
take
when's
a
the
look at the
deadline?
site and send
When's
them
the
our way.
deadline? When's the deadline, Rick?
The deadline is October 1st for submissions.
Oh, half a minute.
We're excited about it. We're going to show these films are going to be shown both, in person and virtual, and we're going to have I think we'll have a big audience, and it's going to be really special. So looking forward to it. And
Are
looking
all the
forward to
other,
seeing all of you in Utah.
yes. Are
Absolutely.
you going to have all of those additional elements to brand storytelling that you did in the past?
Yeah, we'll
As well?
have, panels and discussions and, but a bigger emphasis on actually, showing films and talking about them, having the producers, directors, even, some of the talent that's in some of these films, and, the brands and agencies, and each
Super
one's a
cool.
case study.
Super cool. Well, thank you again, everybody. Be well.
Take
Thanks,
care,
all.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.